Alternative Dig Talk. Real issues, real talk.
Hi Rogers, can I ask you something?
Shoot.
What does corruption mean?
Well, summarily, corruption is abuse of public power for personal gain or for the benefit of a group to which one owes allegiance. For example, when a public office is abused by an official accepting or soliciting a bribe. By the way, private people can be corrupt too, like bribing police officers to escape fines.
Okay. So exactly how does that concern me?
Well, do you pay taxes?
I guess, yeah. What does that have to do with this?
Everything. Because those taxes you pay are supposed to facilitate services you use, like water, electricity, roads construction, medicines in hospitals, name it.
Okay, that is much bigger than I thought. But it can be stopped, right?
Well, yes, it can, although it may not be as easy as it sounds. And here is the reason why. Corruption roots are grounded in our country's social, political, economic, bureaucratic traditions and policies.
So, what has kept it going this long? I mean, why don't we stop it?
Well, the main reason why it has been here for so long is because institutions are weak, either as a result of poorly defined ethical standards of public service, weak administrative and financial systems, or ineffective watchdog agencies.
What can we do to stop it?
At a national level, we must focus on strengthening the independence and effectiveness of public institutions that fight corruption. At a personal level, we must commit to never giving a bribe.
I promise I'll never give a bribe.
Well, that's a great decision you have made. Me and you now have to spread this message to all our friends. If we all do our part, corruption will be no more.
This message is brought to you by Alternative Digital.
Go to the church, though.
Tawali man, what's up?
Man, can you imagine people just dump everywhere? Someone drinks water and throws the bottle wherever.
Come on, Rogers. What else do you expect people to do with an empty bottle?
Simanya now, recorder. Did you know that plastics take at least 450 years to decompose?
What? That's a long time.
Exactly. Because plastics are made out of a lightweight and flexible material that doesn't decompose easily. And plastics everywhere in the environment cause plastic pollution.
What is plastic pollution now?
It is the accumulation of plastic waste in the environment, like bottles, polythene bags, straws. All of these contribute to plastic pollution.
I have been using them without knowing their effect.
Yeah, a lot of people have. Plastics are a danger to the ecosystem, both on land and in water.
So how can we overcome this problem? Is there something we can do?
Oh yes, we can reduce by minimizing the use of plastics, reuse by repurposing them, or recycle by collecting and processing them into new products.
Everyone wants to change the world, but no one wants to change themselves for the world.
How about we change our habits for the world?
And it starts with me and you.
This message is brought to you by Alternative Digital. The Alternative Dig Talk. Real issues, real talk.
Good evening and a warm welcome to Face the Nation. My name is Edgar Matthew Karuhanga. Every week we have candid conversations with various individuals right here on Face the Nation as we try to find out what is happening in the country but also hold them accountable. And this evening I'm privileged and honored to have a lawyer, a former East African Legislative Assembly Member of Parliament. He's an advocate, as I've already told you, of the High Court. And particularly for this show, he is the Vice President of the Democratic Party. That is none other than Fred Mukasa Mbidde. Thank you for facing the nation, sir.
Thank you, my brother. I equally greet the viewers.
Thank you. We're going to start on a sad note. This week, we lost Pope Francis.
Yes.
It's a sad thing to watch, and millions of people have commemorated his life, celebrated him. What is your message about Pope Francis?
First of all, I commend Pope Francis for purposes of his meekness and ignobility. He has been a down-to-earth Pope. He has had high affinity to the downtrodden. He has had a strict voice. in the face of any violations. And in my opinion, I think he has been a very good leader of the Catholic Church. We expect and hope, obviously, that the Almighty will give him and his soul eternal peace. He has done so for those that have not served him. Why wouldn't he do it for those that have concentrated on serving him, like the Pope?
You talk about meekness, which brings out humility, and oftentimes
Yes.
you don't find many people who are that humble, especially when they have such an office.
That is
I
true.
want us to bring it back here. For the religious leaders in this country, if you were to juxtapose them with the Pope, what would you say? How would your juxtaposition be?
First of all, there is a diseased condition that accompanies high offices, high-powered offices. It is a condition of feeling of extreme honorableness. In fact, the honorific dignity, that is in proper English, where somebody begins to feel that because you have become a leader of some sort, then obviously you are no longer on the ground. You know, leaders are just like a bird that jumps from the ground to an anthill, but which forgets that it is still on the ground. Now, that disease of extreme honorableness affects a lot of leaders.
Even religious leaders?
To the extent, yes, it does. Of course, I have heard. Haven't you heard of religious leaders burning Bibles, doing this and that, pontificating over issues for which obviously they cannot have the highest moral authority to adumbrate or to pontificate about? Okay. You see, a religious leader almost assumes the position of God before the flock. Now, that leader has been obsessed with that kind of extreme honorableness. A religious leader must continuously maintain his quest to know God to the extent that then he can be in a position with dexterity to guide the masses. Okay. But we have got leaders that have assumed almost a position of God or deputy God.
What happened? Because we had the Janan Lowums of this world. They lost their lives fighting for a cause. What happened to our religious leaders today?
No, the religious leaders today have been affected by the economics of the country. In fact, personal desires have replaced the ideal that they would have been as leaders. Today, when you find pastors in all churches and priests, they are chasing demons from younger girls instead of chasing very big issues like trampling on fundamental human rights, disappearances, maintaining leaders in prisons. You don't find religious leaders speaking about the same. You find them concentrating on chasing small demons, for which evidence we don't even have, from younger girls. And you can imagine that is exactly what they have become. It's not the first time
you talk about demons and chasing.
It angers me.
What's your problem with that? Because these people are getting what they call freed from such conditions. So does that make them bad, religious leaders?
But what is the objective reason that makes it a logical necessity for a younger girl to believe that there is a demon? These are all circumstances that are the very definition of poverty. Okay. They are no demons. Now, when somebody continues to pontificate as if they are demons and his major concentration is chasing the same from younger girls, when you know that the operations of state have made it a logical impossibility for anybody to think uprightly and manage the economic conditions around that person, and that the only recourse now is either to comedy shows or church, because this is where now young people have flocked.
Exactly.
They either go to comedy shows or church because there is extreme absence of happiness elsewhere except the two.
Oh, you talk about happiness, and that brings me, we are one of the happiest countries in East Africa, if you did not know. So how do you conclude to your happiness? Because Uganda has been voted, I think, 3 times now as the happiest country. You people are okay.
Actually, mad men are happier. So if you associate Uganda with happiness, then our degree of madness equally should be assessed. I can tell you, I have never seen a madman who is angry. They are, even faced with a heap of chaff, the madman will be looking at a heap of gold within the chaff itself. It is psychologically stated that a madman actually is living a life of comfort. He believes everything he sees is actually below sea level, and he's the only one walking on water like Jesus. So if that is the kind of happiness that you expect of Ugandans, then I have no problem.
Okay, thank you. We started on that note because of the death of Pope Francis. May his soul rest in peace. Let's get back to the politics. How is the Democratic Party?
Yeah, it is limping at a very fast rate. But I cannot say safely that we are actually walking and running safely.
What do you mean by limping?
Limping, we are now, as the Democratic Party, obviously dealing with an agreement, which has caused it was an agreement ideally of cooperation with the ruling NRM, which has in effect culminated into the disappearance of our own identity. So we are now suffering an identity crisis, and this is the kind of crisis which is a mongrel of some sort. A mongrel would be the kind of animal, maybe a dog, but whose breed cannot be ascertained. Now, and this is what we are going to market into the population for ballot box purposes. So I can safely tell you there is a lot of work we are going to do between now and the next delegates conference in order for us to assume a stature capable
You
of being
were one
sustained
of those
in the
people
next election.
who were pro that.
Yes.
That team.
When
You preached bliss, and you were behind this union with the National Resistance Movement.
Yes. When you look at the contents of the agreement, anybody that is sane in Uganda would have supported it. Because the contents had everything to do with an amendment of electoral laws in order to establish independence of election management in Uganda. That is number one. It had everything to do with respect for human rights, respect for freedoms of the media, and access to the media, even by those in competition with the current government. It had everything to do with establishment of format and framework for a peaceful transition in Uganda. Now, those are choices for everybody that wishes Uganda well. And where such contents are contained in an agreement, then obviously signing an agreement of that nature would be everybody's happiness. That is why we supported it, and we thought it was definitely something that would bring Uganda into a proper political El Dorado, which never happened.
Political El Dorado. You use powerful statements. But when you were conniving or working with Mr. Museveni, what did you expect?
Nobody was working and conniving.
You had an agreement working together.
The agreement
same
was
agreement you're
intended
about
to establish a cooperation. There is evidence that that agreement exists and it was signed. But just like a constitution, it was never followed. So ideally, everything reduced into writing can only be implemented by those that are principles to it. Now, when it is not followed, you do not accuse the idea of the existence of the agreement. For example, we have a constitution, and I can safely tell you that whatever was included in that agreement is actually provided for in the laws of Uganda. But we are faced with a president who actually believes that what was written in the agreement were news. And for me, I laughed when I read it.
What did you expect? What did you expect going in this association or cooperation with Mr. Museveni, with his track record? And I know you to be a political scholar of this country. You have studied how Museveni has worked over time. Did you expect anything different, really?
Everybody expects something different in Uganda. Those that support the agreement and those that never supported it. There are those that expect something positive from an election organized by President Museveni. They are just the same as those that believe that actually an agreement signed by him will equally be implemented. So in Uganda, we live under hope and expectation for the future and the better.
Okay.
We are not different. In fact, there are even you who believe that in the absence of freedom of the press, you are going to be a journalist. So we are the same. Yes.
But you sound jilted. You sound like you have vendetta over this cooperation. Some people think you did not gain from it. Robert Mao is minister. Siranda is
nobody.
here. You did not gain from it. Is that why you are guilty?
Of course, a lot of people can in Uganda, we have persons posing as analysts, when actually these are supposed to be students by those that analyze issues. Honorable Silanda is occupying a seat at the East African Legislative Assembly.
Yes.
I occupied the same 10 years ago and there was no agreement. So you cannot say that it is the subject of an agreement. It is not. So that information is with all falsehood intended to hoodwink the public into the expectation that the agreement was about sharing positions of authority.
Wasn't it?
It wasn't. The establishment and appointment of the Honorable Norbert Mao as a Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs was intended to be a tool of implementation of the agreement. Because we insisted that we don't believe the NRM people are actually up to the task in terms of amendment of all laws. To the extent then that we were handed over a tool. We didn't know that the tool would be handed over, but the field would be inaccessible. So it is like somebody giving you grants of a hoe and a tractor and making sure that all engines from the tractor are pulled out. The hoes are actually at your disposal, but the land is fenced off against anybody's entry.
But I thought,
so that is what existed.
I
And,
thought that as Mao is in that cabinet meeting with Mr. Museveni, then, as you said, implementation would be easier.
Yes, if that cabinet is only discussing the cooperation agreement. But we have a cabinet that has to do its job despite the presence of an agreement. And the reason why we intend to have it terminated, I am sure as a journalist you have been introduced to media law, because journalism was my first degree.
Yes.
Now, media law includes, among others, a study on contracts. And the contracts can actually be, there's what we call termination of a contract.
Yes.
Or we can say discharge of a contract. Now, a contract and an agreement are almost the same. But how do you discharge a contract? One, you can discharge that contract by implementation. For example, I have a contract of supply of 100 sacks of maize to you for purposes that you would pay me certain amounts of money that we would refer to as a consideration in circumstances. Once I supply the 100 sacks of maize,
The deal is done.
or beans, that agreement has been disposed of.
Yes, exactly.
That is one other way through which an agreement or a contract can be dealt away with. There is also another, which is breach. If I breach an agreement for
don't
the
do your
supply of
part.
the same, I have discharged that contract by breach. Now, I have definitely made sure I have not implemented, or we have actually not served the intents and purposes of the contract. That is one other framework. Then the third one would be termination, or by agreement. We could say that by agreement, this is a contract that cannot be achievable. For example, we have contracted that I am going to supply you drinks for your bar. But then something comes up. All of a sudden there is COVID-19 and all bars are closed. So it is a frustrating event. Now that one brings out two major procedures and processes. The first process and procedure would be that one, that is a contract that has suffered an extraneous attack that makes it impossible for any of us to actually implement the same. So that is why when we are drafting agreements, we include the material like force majeure.
What happened in the case of
an
Museveni and
intervening.
DP?
Hold on, because you see, when you pose a question,
Yes, sir.
except if we want to behave like Wazoks, it is important that you actually listen to the answer.
I am listening.
Because for purposes of the benefit of the viewers. So there are four major particularities through which an agreement can be discharged.
Yes, sir.
The President of the Republic of Uganda, in our opinion, discharged the agreement by breach. So it was breached. It was never discussed. It was
you
never
achieved from the years you've been cooperating.
It was never implemented. So that is why I have proposed a framework of termination of that agreement. So that we
why
don't
now?
take an agreement that in effect is becoming a danger to our own message to the population, to the ballot box.
You look like you are just packaging yourself to brand yourself to look better in the eyes of the audience, because they know you are working with Mr. Museveni and they don't agree with Museveni. Because now it's the election season.
But you are right.
The election
But why
season-
would they know we are working with Museveni? Why we are not, when we are not working with him? So we must make sure, just like you are saying,
Yeah,
we
but I'm saying,
we
why
rebrand.
now? You're looking like political
You
people
know,
who just want to take advantage.
but we are
Yes.
discussing current affairs. So
Yes,
when
sir.
you say why now, it is because this is now.
No, but you wasted 3 years of people, of the Democratic Party members,
Yeah,
cooperating with Mr. Museveni.
For how many years have we had elections in Uganda?
More than 30 now. At
More
least
than 30. Who has been appointing the chairperson of Electoral Commission and all commissioners of the commission?
The president.
The president. So people have wasted 30 years believing in President Museveni. And we have wasted, in your opinion, 3 years believing in him. So who is I cannot say who is stupid, but who is anything closer to that? The one of 30 years or the one of 3 years?
30 years we are not working with Mr. Museveni.
No.
You're actually going through an electoral process, a government process that is always there every 5 years to change power.
Yes.
So,
but
I'm
I
not
have
cooperating.
been asking you.
Your president is in the cabinet with the president. They are working together.
I have been asking you
And
because
3 years down the road, you don't have anything to show.
I have been asking you because I want you to get the clear picture.
I am getting it.
Persons have been participating in an election whose results are declared by persons appointed by one of the candidates for 30 years, just like you have said. That candidate is the same person we wrote an agreement with, promising that we will have a peaceful transition. So we are all believers. We have believed him for 2 years. They believed him for 30 years. So who fails the assessment test?
How do you then go back to the people?
In fact, for us, we have seen it earlier than those that haven't seen it and are preparing for an election. So you should praise us for seeing it earlier, that we should disentangle from him, than those that are now garnering and preparing, in fact, with all powers oozing in preparation for another election. Where it is just like a labor ward, where you are sure the midwife is going to switch the baby. So for us, we are even wiser. And we should be credited by the whole country for being wiser.
How are you wiser?
One, we have seen it earlier than 30 years that this agreement was never going to be implemented. Number two, we got him to sign an agreement, thereby giving full proof that probably he does not honor agreements that he has signed. None of the other guys have come out to say that until electoral procedures and processes are amended, we will not participate in an election. So who is wiser? We are the ones. And in fact, we cannot say no if anybody wanted to erect tents in order to celebrate our own wisdom.
Are you proud of your president, Mao Norbert?
Over what?
Over how he has run the party in the last, let's say, 5 years?
The last 5 years, yes, I
From
am
2020.
fine. I am fine
What
with
are
him.
you proud about him?
One, I can say he brought the national character of the party. You see, we inherited a party where the innuendo material surrounding it were in such a way that it was supposed to be a centralized political party, Catholicized political party, and it had only 4 members of parliament. In fact, the 4 members of parliament were almost owned by one individual called the Alhaji Nasser Ntege Sebagala. We have run this party to the extent now that it has got even regional representation in parliament. We sprang up to around 15 members of parliament, but we are now down to 9, and I do not know whether we can achieve our major other targets possible and practicable.
Okay.
Number 2, he has forged unity of the party.
Unity?
Of the National Executive Committee of the party. In terms of unity in the whole country, nobody has done so. And in fact, I know that you are saying there is no unity in the party simply because there is opposition within the party.
There is a division.
Unity and unanimity are completely different. So we are not unanimous in terms of how the party should be run, in terms of decisions that should be taken.
So are you united?
But we are united as members of the party. So opposition is also the subject of unity. And rebellion is the subject of this unity.
Okay, so
and we don't have it yet.
How do you go in 2026 as the Democratic Party?
That's what we are choreographing. There is no single answer because we are still treating terribly Part of the procedures and processes towards that include termination of this agreement. And these are things that I have been telling you about.
Okay. Fred Mukasa Mbidde, Vice President of the Democratic Party, is facing the nation this evening. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Edgar Matthew Karuhanga. Let's move on. Let me even ask you this. Are you standing in this election that is coming? Will you stand in any position?
Of course. I will show up on the ballot paper. I have just not gone public on where and what. And that is going to be breaking news for Uganda.
Thank you.
Yes.
Even if you don't tell us the actual position, but you have been, for lack of a better word, rubbishing the elections and said that they have brought us a candidate, the same candidate for 30 years. And you know that the baby, use the analogy of the baby is going to be switched. Why do you go in an arena where you know the baby is going to be switched?
You see, this is just like an accident. The driver of a vehicle that knocks you is not the one that teaches you how to limp. Somehow that one is a spasmodic procedure. It is by automatism that you begin limping. And for us, we are limping into that election.
Okay.
Not because it is the best, it's the most organized election, but because we know it is the best thing to do, at least for Uganda. I can safely tell you, there are elections we have seen all over the world. I think we had almost 17 to 18 elections in Africa, just last year. We have had almost 6 elections, 5 elections where the opposition has taken leadership. The 6th election in South Africa where the incumbent political party has been humbled to the extent that it could no longer form government alone, except by other help. We have seen elections, democratic elections, even in the Republic of Somaliland, which has not yet been recognized as a country, but at least it runs its own democracy. Okay. We know that elections have everything to do with the independence of the Electoral Commission. Okay. Participating in an election is making sure that we don't take the country to war, but we make sure that at all times there are reasons for which we must continue telling the country that we need amendments here and there. Okay. If you oppose, if you for example, you boycott an election, a boycott is a process. There must be an answer to that election you have boycotted, that you establish. If you enter into an election, there must be a procedural step that you need to take, subject to the reasons and results of that election. Okay. So that is what we are going to do.
Do we need more political parties? Because there is a new political party that is under formation, PFF. Some of the dividends, or people who divided from the Forum for Democratic Change, are vying to start a political party. And in the normal democratic process that we have in Uganda, the real Uganda we have, are political parties relevant, or is this the solution?
Ugandans are not members of political parties. They are supporters. In fact, the process and procedure I have always talked about is what we call celebrity panjandura. Ugandans have got a decision. They feel they need a new government. They feel they need a difference. They feel that at any level, at any time that we have voting, there are some leaderships that actually keep changing, right from grassroots to, except at presidential level. They know that at every stage and step an election is concluded, change almost means no change. So Ugandans don't belong to political organizations. They belong to a sentiment, because the system established is an indirect authoritarian rule. The system established. Some people think that it is NRM party which is in power. But all political parties are not operational, including NRM. The NRM that you call a party is a mere apostrophe. It's not a full sentence in the governance of Uganda. They don't take a decision. There is a government that actually leads the country.
The decisions come from SEC, NRM SEC.
SEC is just a uniform that one man wears. He established a system of puppetry where he is the puppet master and all the others are just muppets. He's the one pulling the strings. You can call it by any name. You can even call it SEC, you can call it police, you can call it Electoral Commission, you can call it UPDF, you can call it the judiciary, but it is just a government by one man. You won't even call it NRM party or organization.
Okay.
But he has established a dogmatic cult with a simplified and easily graspable catechism, but with him as the high priest celebrating the
But
mass.
this has happened for
So,
30 years.
Of course.
That means
over
what
30.
effect has he left
The effect,
in that?
the
And
eff-
where does Uganda go?
the effect is the dire death of institutions in Uganda. He has established a cross-sectional command structure
Okay.
where it is his whims that are actually implemented, other than the objects for which any organization is established. He can decide to arrest a corrupt official. I can safely tell you that all organs and organizations are failing to do the job.
Okay.
When you look at the IGG, I think in terms of fishing, she engages in illegal fishing.
How so?
She has nets that can actually only trap small fish.
Okay.
So that is illegal fishing in terms of fishing.
I get you.
So the big fish are never caught. So the system that now moves, it moves on his whims. And we are not dealing with the youngest president in Africa.
Exactly.
So he's not as younger as he was while he came in. Now, if you choreograph a country to move on whims of personal decisions of somebody you know that is not younger, then the meaning is that it establishes a sluggishness of procedure of the whole country, body setup.
If he never,
So you will now find that all roads have potholes, all schools have problems, teachers are actually trading in markets, and of course market vendors are beginning to teach as part-time job. So you find that everything now is completely discombobulated,
I
and
don't know
that
if
is
it's
where
me who's
the
seeing a
problem lies.
gloomy picture, but then at the end of the day, if this man who you say is elderly, if he does not wake up by just biology and genetically,
Today,
where would the country go? Would you paint a picture for us?
okay, we have some constitutional process. The constitutional process right now, I don't know for how long we are left with in order to conclude this government.
Yeah.
If it is a year, then we don't have elections. The communication is only given to the Chief Justice, and of course, taking oath of office is done by the Vice President.
That's the procedure.
Ideally, if it was beyond 1 year, we would have elections within 6 months
Okay.
under the Constitution. But because it is just a year or less than a year, then the Vice President takes us up to the next general election.
Okay.
So,
That's
but
the
now that is the
procedure.
ideal
Exactly,
process.
yeah. So let's come to...
The procedure today is that he has been brilliant enough to establish his own transition upon death. That now there must be seismic powers that are referred to in terms of who organizes. First of all, who okays the announcement that he didn't wake up? Who convenes the Army Council, for example, and who chairs it? The Army has a very big role to play in terms of what happens, even constitutionally, when we are now going to face a transitional process. The Army must say yes. It has got an answer to give. It is now being led by General Muhoozi.
Wow.
So that means he has answered the transition question intellectually in his head, that upon death, this man here has got a word to say.
Wow.
Now, who is leading the retired forces? Which forces is General Saleh leading?
General Saleh does not actually have a position in this government, really. If you say officially, there's no position.
Okay, one, of course, he is a
apart from
presidential
running,
advisor
and running.
on, I think, either defense or military affairs, whichever.
Yeah.
Mutatis mutandis. So
He's also running Operation Wealth Creation.
Of course, that one now endears him into the population, because we are dealing with a population that is tainted with poverty. So obviously, wealth creation now gets you closer to almost everybody in Uganda, which it has done. A lot of our people don't look at most of these things critically. And you know, they keep on just rubbishing them. But these are material appointments that actually have everything to do with the transition.
Okay.
Yes.
As we gear up for the 2026 elections, one of the biggest opposition figures in this country, retired Colonel Dr. Kiza Besigye, is still behind bars, charged with treachery and treason. How do we enter an environment of politics when such a great man is going through what he's going through? What's your comment on that?
When I look at Dr. Besigye, the person that comes to mind is the former finance minister of Eritrea. I think it's called either Haben or something. Well, one of the name is not clear in my head yet. But this is a guy who came up with a piece of advice that let us now come up with a budget that is more transparent to the population. He was imprisoned for 6 years and died in prison by his own president. So when I look at Dr. Besigye, there is a very big likelihood that he might die in prison. Ugandans, however, have got a major hypocritical behavior, which is extremely disgusting. That hypocritically, Ugandans will always refer to who is available as the best. The level of forgetfulness that we have in Uganda is actually material for Guinness Book of Records. If we didn't have that forgetful nature as Ugandans, there are people for whom we would never clap. But that is who we are, and in my opinion, I shudder at anybody that does not know that what is going on is a very serious problem. It is a judicial attack by the executive that everybody must have to look at.
Wow. You talked about the judicial attack. I want to also talk about the legislature. Recently, they've been dished or given 100 million, and as we speak today, some MPs are 100 million richer. What is your comment on this tokenization of Uganda's politics, especially in parliament?
Yeah.
40 million coming, this million.
We have a problem. One thing I think the country needs to look at is to establish a procedure where governance gets back to the intellectual realm, where the intellectuals recapture the political wing of the country, the administrative wing of the country.
Okay.
Where we have reached now is that now idiots have a quorum and they are voting for each other. And this is going to be a very big problem for the future of Uganda's leadership. Because they have quorum at the ballot box. Parliament is now almost full of voters. They were just angry that the former members of parliament never looked after their own financial needs. So they decided to vote for each other. So we have got otherwise we would have been beneficiaries of PDM. Now they are receiving their own PDM by way of parliamentary handouts. So they can't say no, because that is who they are.
But this is not just this parliament. Even the previous parliament, money has been...
Yes, because
should we say it's a people
it
issue,
has
not
been
just
a
parliament
sequential failure by Ugandan body politic to keep voting for voters and making sure members of parliament lose elections. So almost 80% in each electoral cycle of members of parliament lose their own seats.
Okay. Yeah.
So it doesn't, the person is getting voted for are just parokas and dimwits. Now, I can tell you that they are stuck. They don't even know what to do.
The guys in suits, the elites like you, have shied away
because
from the politics.
They don't have votability. Today, sense does not make sense at all. In fact, you can now not go to an electoral process vending a manifesto full of policy framework and suggestions. If you do so, it is just a mere thin veneer. A thin veneer would be that furniture covering what is otherwise trash inside. You know, the Chinese usually make their own furniture in such a way that when you look at it on top, the surface is just heaven. But what is inside, if you just broke off, it is covered by a thin veneer. So in Uganda, reference to policy while making a quest for an office, I think is a logical impossibility. It doesn't make sense at all.
Wow. Thank you.
So the results of an election is actually what is happening
is
in
what we are
Parliament.
witnessing today.
Yes.
As we conclude, Honorable, why don't you unite as the opposition?
Yes,
NUP, DP. You have, one would say, a common goal. Really?
we do, ideally.
Why don't you?
We have a very big problem. Let me break it down. You see, the Kenyans have got something they say. You know, stomach in Swahili is tumbo. Now, politicians in Uganda are no longer now technocrats. They are now tumbocrats. So we have people that have shifted their understanding of issues and decision making from the brain to the stomach. So what you are doing is, if you want to deal with so and so, you can no longer play with his brain, just play with his stomach. The rest will follow. They are dragged along any decision by just getting hold of somebody's stomach, and that's it. That is number one. Number two, the political leaders have equally, almost all of us have assumed some kind of gladiatorial supremacy. You have looked at, where somebody has got at the subconscious level of their brain a belief that they are gladiators. They are so huge.
That's your politics. The politics of personalities.
It is one of the causes of the disunity you are talking about. So it makes it very hard for us even to sit together. We have seen political parties on the opposition claiming that they are actually more powerful than the rest. You look at them and they are like pygmies, but each one claiming to be taller than the other. And with that kind of supremacy, gladiatorial supremacy,
Yes, sir.
it becomes almost impossible for anybody to even believe that you can sit with a smaller person. So there is a big problem.
Then you cannot take power.
Then they are now crumbling. You see, what now is the preoccupation of every political party is the next election, not even the next generation, the next election. So they, just like frogs, they believe every type of water is for swimming, even hot water. So that is how we are behaving. So you see a political party jostling for procedures and processes of going into another election, just like a frog. It looks at hot water, but it believes it is just water anyway. Swimming is in progress. So that is what we are doing. And until the intellectuals, and I think my now prayer is for professors, particularly university professors, and the elite. And it doesn't matter even whether NRM or opposition. I wish they can commence a procedure of uniting us. That will make sense.
But
and this is not for the next election,
yes,
but for the next generation.
Yeah, but we have a leadership or a system that does not respect professionals, if you realize that. Many a time, Mr. Museveni has laughed at them.
Yeah.
So how do they influence, yet they are not even respected enough in such a dispensation?
Then they should know we are the same sufferers. You see, if you are not respected, that should unite us. It's just like when we meet in prison, we obviously become brothers. So we are fed on the same umbilical cord of torture. That one should be used as a cloak. It must be used as an instrument of unity than disunity. And that is why I really pray that we can definitely commence a procedure that can make us united.
Lastly, what do you speak about the person of Muhoozi Kainerugaba, who is most likely in the, organized to take power from his father, according to what you have said? What's your comment on this gentleman?
I don't know whether he's organized to take power, personally.
He's the CDF.
Yes, but there is no power as CDF. I don't think Museveni was CDF before in his life. So that would have meant that being CDF means taking power. Maybe you can tell me one CDF who has taken power in Uganda.
I haven't seen any.
So, but I can
Even
safely tell you
wasn't.
that he's one guy that most people do not understand. He's full of diversion. He's an intellectual and nobody knows, except if you get closer. If you want to
doesn't sound
discuss
like
materialism, dialectical materialism, materialism and the dialectical method, brain work, it is only distant persons that don't understand who he is. Most of them run to the social media bollocks that he actually posts. But those are diversions. A person who actually does that and that is his personality, cannot lead an army for 1 week, and there is no mutiny. So, but these are things that people don't even understand. He's
But he has
completely
said
different.
these things that, and in his capacity as CDF.
Have you heard him say any of those?
No, he has texted.
So what I am telling you
social
is
media
what you
is-
should take.
okay.
Otherwise, social media, I see a lot of things on social media. We have got people on social media that are actually the wealthiest in Uganda by portrayal. In fact, if you follow social media to determine the kind of lifestyle you want to lead, I shudder because, and I pity you, because what is on social media is actually complete balderdash and complete lies.
An illusion.
Social media is a diversion itself.
Okay.
The portrayals there are a nuisance. People do so for several reasons.
Okay.
I am told that there is, even now, when you look at TikTok and some of those other things, I am told now it has become a job.
Yeah.
Now, social media is one of the biggest procedures through which journalism has been desecrated. Because you see, now you are professional journalists, but I can tell you that there are wazoks on social media that now have got a bigger following than you are. They are establishing a community within us that has nothing to do with intellectualism, that has nothing to do with wisdom, that has nothing to do with correct analysis of what should happen in Uganda. But they have established a bandwagon effect that makes it possible for anybody to be followed, even a mad person. Wow. So, don't use social media to determine the character of a person.
Okay. So,
in fact, now, you see me, when I answer your questions, I can guarantee that social media will definitely pick only those areas where I have spoken words that seemingly obfuscate the meaning that I attach to the words I have said. They call them bombastic words. They only pick areas where I have spoken words that are unclear. And that is my portrayal. But that's not how I speak.
okay.
They come in as they please. I have been like this almost since secondary school.
So let's not
Yes.
consider what Mr. Moses is posting.
Nothing. Just
What
get
about
it.
with Kuleja, and he says if it walks like a duck, moves like a duck, it probably is a duck.
No, a duck is a duck. It doesn't matter whether it
Thank you
walks
so
or
much.
even dead.
Thank you.
It's a duck.
Thank you. That is Fred Mukasa Mbidde, the Vice President of the Democratic Party, but also an advocate of the High Court and former Member of Parliament for the East African Legislative Assembly. Thank you so much for tuning in. From the time we started up to now, every Friday we are here at 5 p.m. having a conversation with Uganda. From the entire team, God bless you. My name is Edgar Matthew Karuhanga. See you again next week, same time, same station. Good evening.
The Alternative Dig Talk. Real issues, real talk.